que Estados Unidos vuelve al Acuerdo de París, de donde nunca debió haber salido. Y esta sin duda una gran noticia, pero no es suficiente. Por eso esperamos que Estados Unidos también se comprometa con la carbono neutralidad, tal como lo han hecho en los últimos días y semanas países como China, Japón y Brasil. Esta semana le envié una invitación al presidente electo Biden para sumarse a este Climate Ambition Alliance y alcanzar juntos la carbono neutralidad antes del 2050. Porque todos tenemos que hacer muchos esfuerzos para lograrlo. Tenemos que convertir al siglo XXI en el siglo de la descarbonización y de las energías limpias y renovables. Es un imperativo ético, es una obligación moral. La pandemia del COVID ha significado un tremendo golpe a nuestras economías, a nuestras ciudadanías, a nuestra capacidad de crecimiento, a la salud y a la calidad de vida de nuestros pueblos. Algunos están planteando un falso dilema entre la recuperación económica y la protección del medio ambiente. Este desafío es una tremenda oportunidad para que invirtamos cumpliendo con ambos objetivos, avanzar hacia la carbono neutralidad y recuperar nuestras economías y nuestros empleos. Una recuperación verde, sana, resiliente, sostenible. Porque en los meses que vienen, las políticas que impulsemos los gobiernos para la recuperación de nuestras economías van a marcar la ruta de la transición hacia un mundo más sustentable. En Chile hemos establecido que gran parte de ese esfuerzo de recuperación esté asociado a una economía verde, renovable y limpia. Durante la COP25 pusimos la ciencia en el corazón de la toma de decisiones y la adaptación en el centro de la discusión para los países, especialmente los que somos los más vulnerables al cambio climático. Y hemos incluido nuevos temas, como la protección y manejo sustentable de los océanos, de los bosques, generando espacios de discusión, trabajando sin descanso en la promoción de esta mayor ambición y colaboración. Estamos viviendo tiempos de grandes desafíos, pero también de grandes esperanzas. Hace mucho tiempo que el planeta Tierra nos está dando gritos de angustia y está pidiendo nuestro compromiso. Y nuestra generación tiene la misión de hacer sostenible la vida humana en el planeta Tierra. Y para ello es necesario crear una nueva cultura de vida sustentable, abandonar la cultura de lo desechable y abrazar la cultura de lo reciclable. Y esto requiere transformar nuestra matriz energética hacia energías limpias y renovables. Chile está 100% comprometido y está, en cierta forma, liderando la revolución del hidrógeno verde, que nos permite mirar con mayor fe y optimismo el futuro. Nuestra generación tiene un deber. We must become the responsible ancestors of future generations. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, President Piñera of Chile, speaking live there from the capital, Santiago. Next, to speak is the partner for COP26 and the Climate Ambition Summit, Giuseppe Conte, President of the Council of Ministers of Italy. Now, Italy is going to be holding a number of key events in preparation for COP26 next year. For example, in September 2021, it's going to be hosting a youth COP, which is going to be bringing together 400 young people from 197 countries. I think that must be just about every country in the world. And it's going to give them a chance to really develop concrete proposals that they want to support the negotiations at COP26 in Glasgow. And Italy is also going to be hosting the pre-COP summit, which is a really important moment to bring together ministers ahead of that climate conference. And so, Giuseppe Conte, live from Rome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, Antonio, Boris, Emmanuel, Sebastian, distinguished guests, 5 years ago in Paris, our countries adopted a landmark agreement committed to strengthen the global response to the existential threat of climate change. Despite our efforts since that day, the world continues to face the rise of global emission and temperature at an alarming rate. The pressure is even higher now as we collectively plan our recovery from the damages caused by the global pandemic. However, in front of this huge challenge, we have the opportunity to build back greener and better. The scientific community tells us that we are still in time to reverse the course of our future, provided that we proceed with unprecedented determination. But we must act now to safeguard our planet, restore biodiversity and ecosystems, and ensure a sustainable future which belongs to the young generations more than to us. As a 2021 G20 presidency and partner of the UK for COP26, Italy is committed to give an important contribution to this common endeavor. We want to use our special responsibility next year to enable ambitious forward-looking agreements within the framework of the 3 Rio Conventions on climate, biodiversity, and desertification. The impact of the pandemic on our social and economic system should not affect our determination to address these challenges through new and ambitious nationally determined contributions, long-term strategies, and the realignment of global financial flows to tackle mitigation and adaptation. As a founding and active member of the European Union, we are proud of its leadership in the fight against climate change. Especially today, following yesterday's decision by the European Council for an NDC aimed at reducing emissions by at least 55% by 2030. But both nationally and as an EU member, we are also firmly committed to long-term strategies, setting out a pathway to net zero emissions by 2050. Therefore, we encourage the start of a race to reach net zero across major global economies. International climate finance will play a key role in achieving these objectives. We stay firm in the global commitment to deliver $100 billion by 2020 to support developing economies in reaching our shared climate goals. Climate change is the most vulnerable first and hardest. Italy has always paid special attention to their need to strengthen their resilience to current and future climate impacts. This is why I'm proud to announce the Paris Agreement. We need to show leadership, reminding that our actions will resonate loudly in the rest of the world. Thank you.
Grazie to Giuseppe Conte, the President of the Council of Ministers of Italy, and making a pledge there to contribute to the United Nations Climate Adaptation Fund. So we're now going to hear from another grassroots activist, from Selina Neyrock Lim. Now, she's a youth representative from Majuro in the Marshall Islands. Now, Selina was one of the global faces of climate change at COP21, that landmark COP21 in Paris. And in fact, at that time, she was the summit's youngest delegate. And today, Selina has a really urgent call to action for all of us. And she wants to set out what needs to be done over the next decade to meet the goals of that Paris Agreement. So let's hear from Selina.
It has been 5 years since the Paris Agreement, and what a tumultuous time it has been. The ever-rising global temperatures have penetrated the world even more acutely. It is the melting of permafrost, forest fires that hit closer to the home of the climate crisis deniers, droughts that ransack living beings of their resources, floods that reminded many of us that we have no escape. All of these felt immensely by those that society continues to minoritize and exclude from the climate crisis discussions when it entails our very livelihood and survival. With the eco-anxiety felt worldwide that at times fears me into immobility, I keep sight that we have until 2030 to radicalize movements, eliminate fossil fuel in favor of renewable energy, live eco-consciously in our personal lives, evaluate our food systems, remove artificial barriers in order to efficiently and fairly allocate funds to countries and communities severely affected. Back in 2015, I sat down with former Minister Tony de Bruin as we delivered our statement thinking my home had till 2050. This is the decade of action. I stand with the anger and disappointment of my youth comrades towards you, the 1% elite of the world, for with the massive influence you have, you failed your big shoes. I stand with the resilience and desperation of my youth comrades, for we have united across the globe to fight for our livelihoods. We demand what needs and must be done. I celebrate the Paris Agreement because my predecessors fought hard to get our 1.5 degrees Celsius lifeline into it. Yet, I also remind all of us how much we haven't done. We mobilize on social ground to bridge the gap to political ground in order to make our goals effective. Como. Thank you.
So Selena there, described as a climate warrior, talking to us from the Marshall Islands. Now, thank you to Selena. Throughout this Climate Ambition Summit, you can tune into our on-demand content on climate, and that's on climateambitionsummit2020.org. And you can also hear from lots of climate activists and experts. So really do urge you to go there. And joining today's conversations on your social media channels, just use the hashtag climate action. Now we're going to show you another film from the WWF team and those behind the latest David Attenborough film. And this looks at the current state of our world. And it's a world that is seen as being currently out of balance, and it's full of expert opinion, and it's also telling us how this whole debate is driven by fact. So let us see our next film.
We have the data. As a scientific community, we have the data. Now we must act.
Ease down. The car is heating up. It's going to explode. We can't get out.
We're approaching tipping points, which could result in irreversible changes.
Join the dots. It's happening. It's happening in your world. It's happening in my world. And let's be very clear about this. It is going to get much worse.
If drastic measures aren't taken right now to arrest the warming of the planet, the world we know today won't exist in 50 years. A report from the United Nations has made the stark prediction.
What we do between 2020 and 2030, from the evidence we have today, my conclusion is it will be the decisive decade for humanity's future on Earth.
It is expensive to not deal with climate change. And if we do not act now, these costs will only grow. There can be up to 60 million jobs that could be created as a result of a more green economy.
The cost of renewables around the world has absolutely plummeted. Renewables are bringing new, clean jobs to communities. We're seeing a new industrial revolution.
By changing the way we grow our crops and the crops we grow, we can definitely mitigate the changing climate.
We need to stop burning fossil fuels. That means we need to stop selling or buying vehicles that cannot run on renewable energy.
We have 17,000 public buses and 22,000 taxis. And in 2017 and 2018, they became electric. The whole environment, the climate, the sky and everything is tremendous as well. You know, we have a lot of blue skies. The air is a lot cleaner, so walking around the city feels a lot more comfortable.
Natural ecosystems across the globe completely regulate our carbon cycle, and in doing so, they regulate the climate.
These ecosystems are really important for fighting climate change. In fact, they're one of the most intense carbon sinks on the planet.
The most promising side of this is that we're seeing sustainability as the entry point for innovation, technology, and business.
I'm quite optimistic. There are so many people across this planet who know how devastating climate change is. Just imagine if all those people start acting. I actually think we've got a chance.
Addressing climate change and saving the world, people may think that that's not something that they have the power to do. But we do. We have the power to do it.
So that film there, looking at the state of our climate today, but also exploring the positive opportunities for the future and that we can make change. All right, so we're going to have a little bit of a change here. I'm going to tell you in advance, we're going to have a collection of world leaders who are going to be coming forward with their new ambitious commitments on climate action at this Climate Ambition Summit. And they all hope that this is going to help deliver the whole world on a greener, more resilient and sustainable path. So first we're going to hear from President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China. And then we're going live to the European Union, where we're going to be joined by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And then we'll hear from Mia Mottley, who's the Prime Minister of Barbados, and then Uhuru Kenyatta in Kenya, the President of the Republic of Kenya. And then we go to India, to Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister there, and then Iván Duque Marquez, the President of the Republic of Colombia. And remember, we got a glimpse of him, but we didn't hear him when he was next to President Piñera. And then we're going to go to Pakistan, to the Prime Minister there, Imran Khan. And then we're going to hear from His Holiness Pope Francis. So let us start then with President Xi Jinping.
尊敬的古特雷斯秘书长先生，尊敬的各位同事，很高兴出席今天的气候雄心峰会。5年前，各国领导人以最大的政治决心和智慧推动达成应对气候变化巴黎协定。5年来，巴黎协定进入实施阶段，得到国际社会广泛支持和参与。当前国际格局加速演变，新冠肺炎疫情触发对人与自然关系的深刻反思，全球气候治理的未来更受关注。在此，我提3点倡议：第一，团结一心，开创合作共赢气候治理新局面。 在气候变化挑战面前，人类没有出路。我们只有坚持多边主义，讲团结、促合作，才能互利共赢，福泽各国人民。中方欢迎各国支持巴黎协定，为应对气候变化做出更大贡献。第二，提振雄心，形成各尽所能的气候治理新体系。各国应该遵循共同但有区别的责任原则，根据国情和能力，最大程度强化行动。同时，发达国家要切实加大向发展中国家提供资金、技术、能力建设支持。第三，增强信心，坚持绿色复苏的气候治理新思路。绿水青山就是金山银山，要大力倡导绿色低碳的生产生活方式，从绿色发展中寻找发展的机遇和动力。中国为达成应对气候变化巴黎协定做出重要贡献，也是落实巴黎协定的积极践行者。今年9月，我宣布中国将提高国家自主贡献力度，采取更加有力的政策和措施，力争2030年前二氧化碳排放达到峰值，努力争取2060年前实现碳中和。在此，我愿进一步宣布，到2030年，中国单位国内生产总值二氧化碳排放将比2005年下降65%以上，非化石能源占一次能源消费比重将达到25%左右，森林蓄积量将比2005年增加60立方米，风电、太阳能发电总装机容量将达到12亿千瓦以上。中国历来重信守诺，将以新发展理念为引领，在推动高质量发展中，促进经济社会发展全面绿色转型，脚踏实地落实上述目标，为全球应对气候变化做出更大贡献。各位同事，天不言而40行，地不语而百物生。地球是人类共同的唯一的家园，让我们继往开来，并肩前行，助力巴黎协定行稳致远，开启全球应对气候变化新征程。谢谢大家。
Your wife.
Cher Antonio, cher Boris, cher Emmanuel, cher Sébastien et chers amis, 5 ans depuis les accords de Paris et je suis depuis Bruxelles heureux de vous retrouver de manière virtuelle, porteur d'une bonne nouvelle, d'un message fort. Hier, les 27 leaders européens se sont réunis et ont pris un engagement ambitieux, clair, précis. C'est l'ambition de réduire de 55% au minimum nos émissions à l'horizon 2030. Il y a 1 an exactement, au mois de décembre 2019, nous nous engagions pour la neutralité climat en 2050. Nous allons rester totalement mobilisés parce qu'il s'agit pour nous d'un changement complet de paradigme Et c'est le sens aussi de l'accord financier qui a été trouvé sur le plan européen. 1 800 milliards d'euros seront mobilisés tout au long des prochaines années, dont 30% minimum sera dédicacé pour relever ce défi du changement climatique. Pour nous, c'est un projet de société, c'est un projet de prospérité qui se traduit dans le cadre de cet European Green Deal, qui est une batterie de mesures ambitieuses afin de développer l'innovation, de soutenir des emplois, de relever le cadre de vie. Nous voulons aussi agir sur le terrain diplomatique. Nous savons que la mobilisation multilatérale, la coopération internationale sera clé, et c'est en cela que systématiquement, que ce soit en matière de partenariats économiques, de partenariats commerciaux, nous voulons encourager tous nos partenaires dans le monde à rejoindre cette même ambition. Il y a un défi pour notre génération, celui de mettre en avant toute notre intelligence collective, de mettre en avant toute notre détermination pour faire en sorte d'être à la hauteur de ce défi, à la hauteur pour marquer notre respect, notre considération pour l'humanité et pour les générations futures.
Dear guests of the Climate Ambition Summit, 55%. That is now indeed Europe's calling card. I'm glad that the 27 European leaders have signed up to the European Commission's proposal for taking climate action to a new level of ambition. Together with the arrangement on our next 7-year budget, the 55% agreement is a go-ahead for scaling up climate action across our economy and society. We have already started from boosting renewable energy, creating hydrogen valleys, and producing the most sustainable batteries, to launching a wave of building innovation, decarbonizing transport, and protecting and restoring our nature. We are serious about getting our economy on a more sustainable path. But this isn't a task for Europe alone. Europe only accounts for less than 10% of global emissions. Climate change is more than a European issue. It is a human issue. And today there is a global movement for climate action, a movement that counts on powerful nations, but also on countless cities, NGOs, people of goodwill. Europe wants to contribute to the movement and make it grow. We want to work with all those who agree that we must put a price on carbon. We are ready for more ambitious commitments with like-minded countries. And we are supporting developing countries to help them decouple their emissions and their economic growth, just like we are doing in Europe. And it is more than cutting emissions. It is about green finance. It is about restoring biodiversity. It is about a new circular economy that creates jobs and prosperity while preserving nature. Many things have to change so that our planet can remain the same for the next generation. 55% is Europe's contribution on the road to Glasgow. Let's walk this road together.
Fellow leaders and colleagues, I'm honored to speak at this Climate Ambition Summit 5 years after the world came together in Paris and embraced a solution to the climate crisis that included, and I quote, 1.5 to stay alive, unquote. That is the mantra you must know of small island developing states like Barbados. Our optimism and joy in Paris now seems global greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise unabated, and our window to end the crisis is closing. As I speak, the 30th named storm of this record-setting hurricane season has ripped through Latin America, while COVID-19 related debt is consuming our resources, some that was intended for climate mitigation, I might add. Barbados's new nationally determined contribution of becoming fossil fuel-free by 2030 at best and carbon neutral at worst is an even more ambitious target than that of 2015. My government has created the enabling environment for this transition through legislation, incentives, and empowering Barbadian citizens to participate in our energy revolution. Our vision is that by 2030, most Barbadian homes will have solar PV panels on their roofs and an electric vehicle in their garage. Despite our efforts, the fact is that the level of mitigation ambition contained in your NDCs will determine the fate of countries like my own. For unless the climate crisis is addressed, there will be no Build Back Better for countries and economies like mine. Frankly, at the global level, we need to move from placatory rhetoric to real, effective action, or numerous nations across the world will be robbed of their future. I would like to believe that the major emitters are not capable of what would, in essence, be close to climate genocide. I'd like to believe that we are visible and indispensable for them. Let us therefore together act on the responsibility which the climate crisis imposes on all nations and all peoples. The time is now. I thank you.
Your Excellencies, I'm delighted for the opportunity to articulate Kenya's position in this event, which marks the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, to rally much needed greater climate action and ambition. Your Excellencies, Kenya, just like other vulnerable countries, is experiencing frequent and intense bouts of drought and torrential rains, leading to floods with far-reaching consequences on communities, ecosystems, and infrastructure. It is estimated that the loss associated with these natural calamities could be as high as 3% of GDP annually. So notwithstanding the challenges we as a country are faced with because of COVID-19 pandemic, we are still on schedule to update our NDC before the 31st of December this year, which was the deadline. Our first NDC had set a 30% emission reduction by 2030. Our updated NDC commits to abate greenhouse gas emissions by 32% by 2030, which is in line with our Sustainable Development Agenda and our national circumstances. The timeframe set for the implementation of the NDC is up to 2030, with milestones targeted in 2025. To implement the required mitigation and adaptation actions in the updated NDC, we will require approximately $62 million between 2020 and 2030, broken down as follows: mitigation, $18 million, and adaptation, $44 million. Our first NDC was fully conditional to international support. However, for our updated NDC, Kenya commits to support 20% of the mitigation budget from and seeks the international support for the balance. As countries around the world continue to rebuild their economies and communities during the COVID-19 pandemic, my government commits to building back better in ways that increase resilience to future health and climate shocks. And I'm happy to announce that Kenya has commenced the process of developing its climate change and development long-term strategy. And in this regard, my government is demonstrating leadership by being among the first in Africa to develop an LTS. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my remarks, it is my hope and expectation that the G20 countries and large corporations, which collectively account for more than 80% of global emissions and 85% of the global economy, will announce ambitious NDCs and long-term strategies. Without these ambitious announcements, the race to 2030 and the 2050 Paris Agreement targets will be futile. In this regard, I wish to salute those countries and corporations that have already made ambitious targets. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Excellencies, this summit marks the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, the most ambitious step in our fight against climate change. Today, as we are looking to set our sights even higher, we must also not lose sight of the past. We must not only revise our ambitions, but also review our achievements against targets already set. Only then can our voices be credible for future generations. Excellencies, I must humbly share with you that India is not only on track to achieve its Paris Agreement targets, but to exceed them beyond expectations. We have reduced our emission intensity by 15% over 2005 levels. Our solar capacity has grown from 2.63 gigawatts in 2014 to 36 gigawatts in 2020. Our renewable energy capacity is the 4th largest in the world. It will reach 175 gigawatts before 2022. And we have an even more ambitious target now, 450 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We have also succeeded in expanding our forest cover and safeguarding our biodiversity. And on the world stage, India has pioneered 2 major initiatives: the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Excellencies, in 2047, India will celebrate 100 years as a modern, independent nation. To all my fellow residents of this planet, I make a solemn pledge today. Centennial India will not only meet its own targets, but will also exceed your expectations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
El cambio climático es uno de los grandes temas de nuestra era, de nuestra generación, de nuestro momento. Todos tenemos que unirnos para tomar acciones concretas para mitigar y para enfrentar sus devastadores efectos. Colombia representa el 0.4% de las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, pero es uno de los países más expuestos a los efectos del cambio climático. Por eso, nosotros queremos jugar un papel de liderazgo regional y mundial, con acciones claras y concretas que muestren nuestro compromiso indeclinable. Hoy, quiero anunciar de manera muy clara que Colombia se ha trazado una meta, y es que de cara al año 2030 reduzcamos las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en un 51% con respecto al año de referencia, que es el año 2010. Esto significa que trabajaremos con todos los sectores para lograr ese objetivo, que seguiremos apuntándole a una transición energética dinámica con energías renovables no convencionales, que profundizaremos la movilidad eléctrica, que seguiremos haciendo una política pública para sembrar millones de árboles en nuestro territorio, Nuestra meta es sembrar 180 millones de árboles para el año 2022 y este año superaremos los 50 millones de árboles. Esperamos seguir reduciendo la tasa de deforestación, profundizar también el concepto de economía circular y que además en cada ciudadano haya una conciencia para reducir nuestra huella individual a través de reducir, reciclar y reutilizar. Y que todos los sectores de la producción asuman también el compromiso de producir conservando y conservar produciendo. Que avancemos en el Pacto de Leticia, en la protección de los ecosistemas de alta montaña o páramos, y que tengamos también la plena certeza que en el sector de la producción rural debemos mirar cada vez más hacia los esquemas silvopastoriles y debemos tener una producción soportada y sustentada por el criterio y el concepto de la armonía indeclinable con la naturaleza. Esta meta que se traza Colombia es importante, es definitiva y marcará el rumbo de lo que nos queda de nuestro gobierno y las próximas 2 administraciones. Prepararnos y enfrentar el cambio climático no está sujeto a arbitrios ideológicos ni tampoco a teorías partidistas. Es un reto del mundo, de nuestra generación y que nuestro país lo asume con amor profundo por ser uno de los países con mayor biodiversidad por kilómetro cuadrado en el planeta. Tenemos costas en los 2 océanos. Tenemos el 35% de nuestro territorio en Amazonía y el 50% en selva tropical húmeda. Hoy, con este compromiso, Colombia traza una hoja de ruta y quiere llegar a la COP26 a mostrarle al mundo que a pesar de representar el 0.4% de las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, un compromiso de reducción del 51% muestra que queremos trascender. Muchísimas gracias.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Chairperson, Pakistan is the country whose contribution to global emissions is less than 1%. Yet, and sadly, we are the 5th most vulnerable country to climate change. We have decided, firstly, that we will have nature-based solutions to mitigate the effects of climate change. First, by planting 10 billion trees in the next 3 years. Secondly, we have increased the number of national parks, protected areas, from 30 to 45. At the same time, we have decided that we will not power based on coal. We have already scrapped 2 coal power projects, which were supposed to produce 2,600 megawatts of energy, and replaced it by hydroelectricity. As far as our indigenous coal goes, we have decided to look for produce energy either by coal to liquid or coal to gas, so that we do not have to burn coal to produce energy. At the same time, we've also decided that by 2030, 60% of all energy produced in Pakistan will be clean energy through renewables. And also 30% of all our vehicles would be on electricity. So I assure you that Pakistan will be doing its best to make its contribution to mitigate the effects of climate change. Thank you.
La actual pandemia y el cambio climático, que tienen una relevancia no solo ambiental, sino también ética, social, económica y política, inciden sobre todo en la vida de los más pobres y frágiles. De este modo, apelan a nuestra responsabilidad de promover con un compromiso colectivo y solidario una cultura del cuidado que ponga en el centro la dignidad humana y el bien común. Además de adoptar algunas medidas que no pueden aplazarse más, es necesaria una estrategia que reduzca a 0 las emisiones netas. La Santa Sede se asocia a este objetivo moviéndose en 2 planos. Primero, por una parte, el Estado de la Ciudad del Vaticano se compromete a reducir a 0 las emisiones netas antes del 2050 intensificando los esfuerzos de gestión ambiental ya en curso desde hace algunos años, que posibilitan el uso racional de recursos naturales como el agua y la energía, la eficacia energética, la movilidad sostenible, la reforestación y la economía circular también en la gestión de los desechos. Segundo,
Sebastián Piñera Echenique y al presidente de Colombia, excelentísimo señor Iván Duque. Muchas gracias por esta fotografía oficial de la cumbre presidencial ProSur. Van a visitar rápidamente a la sur del Palacio de Gobierno su excelencia, el presidente de la República.
Camino que supera la pobreza energética, que pongan el cuidado de los bienes comunes en el centro de las políticas nacionales e internacionales y que favorezcan la producción sostenible. Ha llegado el momento de un cambio de rumbo. No robemos a las nuevas generaciones la esperanza en un futuro mejor. Gracias.
So Pope Francis there ending that collection of world leaders you heard there making their pledges, and he talked about how he wants to promote ecological education in all Catholic teaching establishments. All right, so next we're going to hear from the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and that's Hoi Sung Lee. But before we hear from him, we're going to see the first of a series of case studies of films. And this one looks at climate adaptation. Now, we're used to hearing a great deal about mitigation, you know, policies that mitigate climate change. But the other side of the coin is adaptation and building resilience. And that's what this film looks at, is how we can build adaptation in communities around the world.
থেকে আসে ট্রলার আসে মালগুলো নিয়ে যায়, তাতে আমরা ভালো লাভবান হই। আমার এলাকা খুব নিচু, 3 মাস শুকনো থাকে আর 9 মাসই থাকে পানি। তখন আমরা অকার্য অবস্থায় পড়ে থাকি। তখন এই ধাপ চাষটাই আমরা আমাদের বাপদাদা করছে, তা আমরা এটা অনেক ব্যাপকভাবে আমরা করছি, যেহেতু আমরা এতে অনেক লাভবান হই। এই ধাপ আমাদের কোনো 5 দিন বর্ষা যদি জলও নামে, আমাদের এই ধাপ কোনো ক্ষয়ক্ষতি হয় না। যেহেতু ধাপের কারণে আমরা
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, thank you for this invitation. I was in Paris for COP21 and saw how governments reached an agreement based on the findings of the IPCC's 5th assessment report. Science tells us that climate is already changing because of human activity. We are currently on a path risking serious, pervasive, and irreversible impacts. But science also shows us that the pathways that can lead to a sustainable and prosperous future. In Paris, we also asked the IPCC for a report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The report tells us that the climate change is already affecting people and nature around the world. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is not impossible, but would mean unprecedented transitions in all aspects of society. There are clear benefits to keeping warming to 1.5 rather than 2 degrees. Stabilizing the climate is compatible with other goals like sustainable development and eradicating poverty. Our last 3 special reports show that the need and possibility for urgent action are clear. Governments are responding to these findings with new commitments.